Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible and clear to everyone. Reem, am I audible? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I'll start off the session with my introduction. So once again, welcome to a webinar on KYC and its importance in capital markets. I'll be talking both from the investor's perspective and what the capital market licensee needs to do as well. So both ways I would be discussing today in this 1 hour session. 45 minutes would be for my presentation. And the last 15 minutes, I welcome questions from each one of you. So questions would be on the last 15 minutes and the first 45 minutes would be my session or discussion. So before I start, let me give my KYC to you. You need to know your trainer, so KYC from my end. My name is Savitha Raghavan and my career span extending 25 years includes being part of the capital market department of a bank in India. I was heading the securitization and trusteeship cell over there. I then moved to Bahrain in 2007. I worked with PwC Bahrain, PricewaterhouseCoopers Bahrain, for a period of 3 years. And over the past 11 years, I've been a senior lecturer with BIBF, training in the area of regulatory and financial crime compliance. So that's my KYC for you. Okay, let's first start from the investor's perspective, because we need to know the investor's perspective as well. Let's assume you want to buy shares, right? So the first thing you would probably do is register yourself with a broker. So the broker is going to ask you a lot of questions. What is your name? You need to sign a KYC form giving your name, your address, your occupation, your source of funds, your anticipated activity, and a lot more. Now, wait a minute. Here I am, an investor. I am putting my money to buy an equity or a bond. Why does the broker needs to know who I am? Where do I live? And where do I get my money from? Right? But then let's take a step back and think about it. Let's assume you're buying a house. Yeah. Would you buy your house from someone who you know that is engaged in a criminal activity? Or would you, let's say you're selling your car, would you sell your car to someone who knows is engaged in a criminal activity? You wouldn't, right? Right? But then when you're buying or selling a car, you definitely would meet the person because you're registering the property during the purchase or sale. So you know from whom you're buying or whom you're selling. But let's assume you're buying a share or a bond or a capital market instrument. You don't know from whom you're buying. You don't know the other person, right? So in order to avoid you from dealing with a criminal person or a person with a criminal source, there is something that the capital market licensee would do on you. And that, my friends, is called the know your customer. So put it very simply, it is just that the capital market licensee needs to know who you are to ensure your protection, as well as protecting themselves from being used for financial crimes like money laundering, terrorism financing, fraud, corruption, etc. Right? So I think the basis is clear. So let's now step into the webinar. So this webinar is going to help you understand what is KYC and let's understand what it is all about. So by the end of this webinar, you will be able to define what is KYC, know your customer. You will be able to discuss the importance of KYC and discuss the basic elements of KYC. So before I go ahead, I hope I'm clear. Is there an echo coming in or is it clear? Hannah, is there an echo or is it clear? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mohammed, Sarah, and Hannah. Thank you very much. Yeah. So let me start with a question for the participants. Which one of the following may not be the primary objective of an effective KYC? Is it A, to minimize the susceptibility of the institution to the risk of illegal activities? Is it B, to ensure compliance with regulations? Is it C, to ensure investor protection against illegal activities? Or is it D, KYC helps increase the profit of an institution? Which one may not be the objective? Absolutely. Usma, Anuja, Sarah, fantastic. Yes. The primary, Rabab, thank you so much, Rabab. Yes, the primary objective of KYC is not to increase the profit. But trust me, proper KYC helps in preventing regulatory penalties. So somewhere down the line, it helps in increasing profit. Though not directly, indirectly, definitely, because cost of compliance can be bad for an organization. Yeah, so thank you so much for that answer. Absolutely, D is the right answer. So the topics we are going to discuss today is what is KYC, why KYC, benefits of KYC, and implementation. I'm also going to talk about the regulator, that is CBB's requirements on what should go into a KYC for both individuals and entities. See, the reason is both from a licensee perspective and the investor's perspective. Investors should know why they are being asked for so many documents. Similarly, licensees definitely need to do this, collect these documents, because end of the day, they want to prevent any regulatory risk, and as a result of which it may lead to a reputational risk. So to prevent any regulatory risk from materializing, a KYC becomes important from a capital market licensee's perspective. Yes, the slides would be available at the end of the session. Definitely, yes. Yeah. So let's jump into the definition of know your customer. So know your customer can be defined as the process and the related documentation to effectively identify, verify, and authenticate a customer. So if you look at the definition, there are two parts to it. One is the process, one is the documentation. So when you are signing out, filling out a KYC form and signing it out, it is a process of knowing the customer. But what exactly it constitutes? If you look at it, I've mentioned three things here: identification, verification, and authentication. What is it? What is identification? Now, Savitha, that is me. I'm identifying myself as Savitha. So that is my identity. Can you trust me on that? Probably no. You need to do your homework before trusting me on my identity. So that is called verification. So how do you verify me? You ask me for my CPR. Give me a document, Savitha, which ensures that you have identified yourself as Savitha. So give me a document which verifies you. I give you my CPR. Fine. But then, is the CPR authentic? What do you need to do? So you would probably put it through a machine readable zone, take a card reader, read the CPR, and then you authenticate that this CPR is indeed genuine. And so Savitha is indeed Savitha, who she is claiming to be, right? So that, my friends, is the process of KYC. So identification, verification, and authentication. That is why identification needs to be verified. And verification can be two types, documentary verification and non-documentary verification. So what is documentary verification? So when I give you my CPR, it's a document. When I give you my utility bill, it is a document. But non-documentary can be, for example, you can verify my address by visiting my residence. That's a non-documentary verification. If you're verifying a company, you would probably go into the public registry, the Sijilat, to verify the company. Non-documentary verification. But the most important thing in financial crime prevention, when we talk about KYC, my friends, it is about identification and verification. If you just rely on identification, the KYC is not complete. Right? So what should go into verification is something we'll be discussing as we go on. What is the objective of KYC? Now, as I was introducing the course to you, I said something. I said, I don't want to deal with a criminal. I don't want to deal with someone who is earning his money from an illegal activity. What is that? So if I want to discuss or define what is money laundering, I'm sure all of you in this session would know what money laundering is, right? So money laundering is the process of wherein the proceeds of illegal activities are introduced into the financial system or converted, concealed so that it appears to be legitimate. So what the criminals try to do is they commit an illegal activity. So the illegal activity can be anything, right? From drug dealing or human trafficking, arms trafficking, or a white collar crime like insider trading, corruption, bribery, fraud, environmental crime, right? So proceeds of any of these activities, proceeds of any of these activities is illegal, right? And if the person who is committing these illegal activities is going to come and register himself or herself with a capital market licensee to buy a share or a bond or a capital market instrument, he is laundering his money using the capital markets, right? So what is it that a capital market licensee should know before even offering the services to a customer is where from the money is coming from. So where is the money coming from? What is the source of the funds? So that is why from an investor's perspective, as I said earlier, you may be thinking, why is the broker why does the broker want to know where my funds are coming from? The broker wants to know where your funds are coming from because he wants to distinguish between whether the money is coming from a legal activity or an illegal activity. If it is an illegal activity, the capital market licensee does not want to deal with you, right? So basic objective of KYC is to prevent illegal funds from coming into the system. So that is one of the most important thing in KYC. Identity is important, address is important, everything is important, but the most important thing is source of funds. And my friends, when I say source of funds, it is not only the identification, it is also the verification. So the customer's source of funds needs to be verified. How? You can take a bank statement, you can take a salary slip, but you need to verify the source of funds. That's extremely important. So identification is not enough. It has to be verified as well, right? So source is done. The second thing is, I don't want so for example, again, going back to the same point, as an investor, I don't want to buy shares from a person who has got it illegally, correct? Similarly, I don't want to sell my shares to someone who is going to use it for an illegal purpose as well. I'm talking about the funds, receiving and sending funds. So as much as source is important, my friends, purpose of funds is equally important. So sending the money to the right person for the right purpose is equally important. So as like you verify the source of funds, the purpose of funds also needs to be verified, because the purpose can be terrorism financing or terrorist activities. So both ways, source and purpose, needs to be identified and verified. Right? So the basic objective of KYC is to prevent entities from being used by criminals for the purpose of financial crimes like money laundering, terrorism financing, fraud, etc. Right? Is that the only objective? No, not necessarily. There may be other objectives as well. We will discuss it as we go. But predominantly, it is to prevent this. Both. It is also to protect the investors from being, their money from being dealt with by illegal criminals. Why KYC is important in capital markets, right? It's very important in capital markets to maintain the confidence of the investors in the financial sector, one of the objectives of a capital market regulator. Similarly, they want to ensure that investors have a safe, secure, and trustworthy capital markets where there is no place for illegal funds or illegal activities. Yeah, so I hope this is clear. What is KYC, objective of KYC, and what is the relationship between capital market and KYC. To continue the discussion on money laundering, one of the primary drivers of money laundering risk is the customer. Customer risk, we talk about customer risk, product risk, jurisdiction risk, delivery channel risk, transaction risk, sector risk, so on and so forth. But one of the primary drivers of money laundering risk is the customer. So capital market licensees do not have any visibility on the customer's customer. Yeah, because trading chains happen in multiple layers, different players are involved, and it is often cross-border. So how do you confirm that the other? So what happens is, you as a capital market licensees will only deal with a capital market licensee in another jurisdiction, which is regulated in the same way you are regulated. So you need to ensure that they do their KYC on their customers as stringently as you do on your customers. So again, investors, that is how capital market licensees protect you, because they only deal with those capital market licensees, those jurisdictions where capital market players are licensed, and they are required to do the same level of due diligence or same level of KYC on their customers as they are doing on you. Right? So that's why in capital markets, each firm in the chain, each intermediary in the chain, each capital market licensee in the chain should fulfill their KYC obligation of its own customer. Right? Okay. So what is the key drivers of KYC? Why KYC? KYC is to prevent money laundering, terrorism financing, insider trading, fraud, etc. And these are not the only ones, many more. It can be market manipulation. It can be Ponzi schemes. It can be wash trading. It can be mirror trading. It can, for example, mirror trading happened wherein Deutsche Bank had to pay a penalty for mirror trading, where two entities traded at the same time, buying and selling between two different jurisdictions. All that they wanted to do was move money from one country to another, one jurisdiction to another. Yeah, so that again, money laundering, right? So you want to ensure that you have a proper KYC in place to ensure that money laundering doesn't happen. Similarly, as I said, purpose of funds. I don't want my funds to move in towards terrorism or terrorism financing. That's why I need a strong KYC. Insider trading. So my KYC helps a capital market licensee's KYC helps in identifying the customers who may be insiders in entities and whether they are buying or selling shares during the record period or not. Right? KYC also helps in identifying fraud. Fraud includes identity theft. So when you're verifying a customer, when you're authenticating a customer, you are sort of preventing a identity theft or any other kind of fraud. So the key drivers of KYC is to prevent entities from being used for any of this. Okay, I will take the questions at the end of the session, but just to answer your question, as I said, when you authenticate a customer, you know, at least know that there is no identity theft, there is no fraud, right? So that is what verification and authentication helps in preventing fraud, my friend. Yeah. Okay. So what goes into a KYC? As I said, identification, verification, and authentication. Identification, identify the customer on the basis of information provided, right? So as I said, I'm Savitha, I work for BIBF, I'm a senior lecturer with BIBF. This is my identification. Verification is collect information. And this is, again, I'm repeating this. This is the most important part of KYC, verification. There is nothing called trust in the world of financial crime. I always keep saying this in my classes. So verification is collect information to verify the information so provided by the customer. And lastly, validate the verified information that customers are who they claim they are. Right? So authentication, as I said, can be by verifying with public registries, can be by authenticating with the IGA. Now we have the eKYC where we are authenticating with the IGA, etc. So that is authentication, authenticating with a government authority, right? So now I'm going to move on into the various requirements under the CBB rulebook. What are the, and each one of this is mandatory. You cannot say that, no, this is not available, so I'm not taking this. No, each one needs to be taken as part of identification. So I'm first touching upon identification and then we will go up to the verification. Now this identification is for natural persons. As of now, I'm going to talk only about the natural persons. Next, I'll talk about entities as well. So the first thing that if you see on a slide says full legal name and any other names used. Why? Why do you need my full legal name? Why Savitha is not enough? No, because when you're onboarding a customer, the first thing I should also know about the customer is whether the customer is sanctioned or not. Right? So I run the name through a sanctioned software. So when I run the name through a sanctioned software, I need to run it properly. The full legal name should be inserted. So my friends, when a customer is filling out a KYC form, ensure that the name is filled exactly in the same way as it is shown in the CPR or the passport or whichever verification document they are providing to you. Right? Because that name is what you use to run to, okay, for the investors in this seminar who would want to know what is all about sanctions. Basically, to put it very simply and shortly, different countries, different regulators do not want us to deal with certain individuals, do not want us to deal with certain entities. They are sanctioned, and so every entity, every licensee needs to run names through a sanctioned software to ensure that they are not dealing with a sanctioned person. So the first requirement is the full legal name and any other names used. The second one is full permanent address. Why do you need the address? Full permanent address. Why can't I just give a post box number? No, I can't give a post box number because I don't want to deal with a shell entity again. I don't want to deal with an entity which has been just set up for the sake of moving funds. like an entity which has no physical presence, no mind and management. I don't want to deal with a shell entity. So I need a proper address, street address, lane address, etc. I need a proper address to be given to me. Postbox numbers will not do. The third one is date and place of birth. Why do you need my date and place of birth? Sometimes there may be so many Savitas in this world, and probably one of the Savita is sanctioned. Just joking. So when, let's say, when you feed the information, you also feed the date and place of birth just to ensure that the Savita you are onboarding is not a Savita who has been sanctioned anywhere else, right? So in addition to other requirements, you also need the date and place of birth, nationality, passport number, current CPR. I'm emphasizing on the word current. I'll talk about it a bit later. Telephone, fax, and email. Contact is very important. Occupation or public position held. The other thing which we need to understand is there are customers who can be a little more risky to the entity, and those are called the politically exposed persons. So when I onboard a customer, I also need to know whether this customer is politically exposed, whether he is a domestic PEP or he is a foreign PEP. Okay, so again, that check is done by running the name through the PEP database, right? So when I'm onboarding a customer, I first ask him or her, are you a PEP? Right? So that's something like a self-declaration, but that also means I still run their names through a PEP database to identify whether the customer is a politically exposed person. What happens if a customer is politically exposed? Nothing. You just need to do additional due diligence called the enhanced due diligence, enhanced ongoing monitoring, and certain other requirements which we'll be discussing later in the session. And then nature and employer's name and address, nature and volume of anticipated business dealings. Now, why? Why should the licensee know what is the nature and volume of anticipated dealings? Now, my friends, I talked about the source of funds, right? When my source of fund, when my source of income and my source of fund is X amount, my transaction volume cannot be 2x or 3x. My transaction volume should be within my source of fund, within my source of income. Yeah, it can exceed. Sometimes I may have an inheritance, I may have other sources, but that is something which the capital market licensee needs to know. Right? So as a capital market licensee, it is extremely important for you to know the type of activity, type of products that the customer is going to use and trade through you. The source of fund vis-a-vis the amount of transactions he or she is going to do through you. And this needs to be monitored, my friends. Again, at the cost of repeating, as I said, if the source of income is X, the transaction volume cannot be 2x or 3x. If it is 2x or 3x, all you need to do is call back the customer and ask for the source of funds. While the source of income is what he or she earns, it can be the salary or can be the business revenue. Source of fund is each time they are transacting through you, they need to know what is the source of fund. So ensure that the transactions are in line with the customer's activity, and that is the reason why you need to know the nature and volume of the business dealings with the capital market licensee. This is extremely important for you to do. Of course, you need the signature of the customer, and source of funds. I think I've talked about enough on the source of funds, source of the securities, right? And lastly, reason for opening the account. So these are mandatory, required, and if you look at this slide, it clearly says these are the identification requirements. Name, I'm filling the form. I'm giving you the identification. Now, each of this needs to be verified. How do you verify this? So you can verify. So for example, Savitha, name. CPR can verify my name. CPR can probably verify my address. CPR can probably verify my occupation as well. I mean, as long as I not changed it. But CPR doesn't verify my source of funds, right? So you need multiple. So one CPR, can it tick mark every identification? No, you can't. You can't use your just a CPR and say I've done the due diligence or KYC. No. So the CBB helps you by saying that you can take the birth certificate, passport, national identity card, which is a CPR or ICAMA, recent utility bill. Again, look at the words, recent utility bill, bank statement. As a capital market licensee, bank statement is something which you can obtain for the source of fund, which is easier for you, or similar statement from another licensee or financial institution, or a tenancy agreement, or you can even directly contact the customer by phone, email, or letter, non-documentary verification. If you look at it, so verification documents can be CPR, passport, utility bill, it can be a tenancy agreement, etc. Right? But note the words current, recent. Why? Because we cannot accept a document which is old, which is an old CPR, an old utility bill, an old bank statement. No, that's not acceptable. That is not a verification document. The verification document should be recent, and of course you should cite the original. Copy should be taken and the original should be cited before you can accept the copies. That is again an extremely important step we should be doing. So again, at the cost of repeating, just filling up of the KYC form and taking the CPR is not knowing your customers. Knowing your customers is much more than that. Like, as I said, every information which you take as the identity needs to be verified with a documentary or non-documentary evidence. I hope I'm clear, my friends. So, just some questions. What is the process if the documents are sent by post following the initial meeting? The CBB is very clear. It has given advice on this. It has said that documents should be certified by one of the following from a GCC or a FATF member state, a lawyer, a notary, a chartered or a certified accountant, an official of a government ministry, an official of an embassy or consulate, and an official of another licensed financial institution. Fine. But the additional requirement you need to do is verify the verifier. What do you mean by that? Means if a lawyer or an accountant or a notary has given you, has certified a document, you need to verify the notary or the lawyer or the accountant by referring to their membership application, etc. Right? Or if it is other than a consulate or a financial institution, you need to verify by a direct phone call or checking up their website, etc. So you need to verify the verifier if the documents are sent by post following the initial meeting. I hope so far everyone is clear. Questions? Yes, I'll take post my session. Last 15 minutes will be definitely for questions. Next. So as an investor, I may not necessarily be an individual. I may also be an entity, right? So as an entity, what are the requirements? Again, full name and any other names, any other trading names used. It's a trading entity, so trading names. Registration number, legal form. Is it a partnership? Is it a limited liability? Is it an unlimited liability? Is it a sole proprietorship? So the legal form, the registered address and trading address. Again, Entities, please be careful. No, do not accept post box numbers because it may be a shell entity. Objective and type of business activity, date and place of incorporation, telephone, fax, email, regulatory or listing body, the names of the senior management. Yeah, you need to know, take the names of the senior management, names of auditors, if any, nature and volume of anticipated business dealings with the capital market licenses. The same logic goes there as well. So even for entities, you need to create a profile. You need to understand what products they are going to deal with using you, and it has to be in line with their revenues very clearly, right? And source of fund. And lastly, the legal representatives. If it is a trust, you need to know who is the trustee of the fund. You need to do a thorough due diligence on the settlor, on the trustee, etc., and the beneficiary, etc. So these are identification documents. So what should be the verification? So the verification includes CR, obviously the certificate of incorporation, or if it is a trust, the trust deed, the partnership agreement, memorandum and articles of association, board resolutions authorizing the activities, and the authorized signatories. A list of authorized signatories also needs to be taken, and copy of the latest financials. If it is audited, well, beautiful. It's required. Ali, I'll take the questions end of the session. Yeah, if that's okay with you. Yeah. So these are the requirements. By the way, it is not one. You need to take each one of them, right? Because, for example, as I said, each one is a verifying document. Just to answer your question, CR is for the entity. You know that there is an entity in existence. Board resolution is to ensure that the authorized signatories are authorized by the board to sign off. Otherwise, the transaction can be null and void. Then what else? Memorandum and articles of association should know whether they can trade, whether it's there in their object clause that they can actually trade or not. So you need to take each of these documents. It's extremely important for you to take because each of this verifies different things, right? So each of this document is important, my friend. Ali, I hope I answered your question now. Yeah. Okay. Next, I move on to digital onboarding. Yeah. I'll be touching a bit on digital onboarding. Yes, again, we have, even in digital onboarding, we have identification, verification, and authentication. How do I do that? I scan my documents and send it across. Then I do a liveness check. I have a live video to show that I'm Savitha with my documents. And then you authenticate it using biometrics. It can be facial recognition, it can be iris scan, it can be fingerprints, and you need to authenticate. That is, see, my biometrics, my fingerprints or my iris scan is identifying, verifying, and authenticating me. The document authentication should be done by, again, authenticating with a government authority like the IGA, wherein you know that these documents are authentic. Yeah, and you should relate this document to the customer. So digital onboarding is allowed, subject to, as I said, verification, identification, verification, and authentication. Some FAQs on digital onboarding. Just thought it will be useful, so I put some frequently asked questions on digital onboarding. Can I be onboarded digitally? Yes, you can you can be onboarded digitally as an investor, provided the licensee is offering digital onboarding services for the product or services you plan to use. Right? So first thing is they need to be authorized by the Central Bank of Bahrain, yeah, to be allowed to digitally onboard you. Any additional requirements? Yes, you will be subject to enhanced ongoing account monitoring requirements. So if you're digitally onboarding someone, you need to do enhanced ongoing monitoring. So it is an enhanced due diligence for any customer who is digitally onboarded. I reside outside Bahrain. Can I be onboarded digitally? The licensee needs to obtain the approval of the CBB for onboarding clients from outside Bahrain using the digital platform. So unless and until the capital market licensee is licensed to do it, they cannot onboard you first from if you are residing outside Bahrain. They need to take the approval of the CBB, right? For onboarding clients from outside Bahrain. So some frequently asked questions on digital onboarding. Okay, fine. So Savitha, I understood what is KYC. I know what is know your customer. I also understood what goes into KYC. And as an investor, I understand why they are asking so many questions when I try to open an account. But sometimes I'm called to submit additional information. Why is that? Now, KYC helps one identifying, verifying, authenticating, but it also helps in understanding your risk. So I'm talking to the investor now. So investors, they understand that you may be either low risk or high risk, and depending on your risk to the entity, they will decide whether they need to do a simplified due diligence or a enhanced due diligence. So if they, based on the profile they created, based on the KYC information you gave them, if they feel that due diligence should be enhanced, they will definitely ask for more documents. So what are these additional documents? The additional documents include, they can ask for, in addition to the normal requirement of occupation, source of funds, etc., they can ask you for the volume of assets. They can ask you for the source of wealth. They can ask you for the intended nature of the business relationship. They can ask you for the source of wealth as well as source of funds. What is the difference? What is source of income, source of wealth, source of funds? Source of income is basically what the customer earns, or what, for example, if he's working, my source of income is my salary from BIBF, right? My source of fund can be different from my source of income. For example, if I sell a car, if I sell my car and bring that funds, that is source of fund. Yeah. So always remember, there should be a verification of the source of income. So when the KYC is done, normally what you take is the source of income, right? And what is the source of wealth? The wealth of the customer, the net worth of the customer. So if the customer is high risk, you need to ask for the source of funds as well as the source of wealth. Then if you approval of senior management is an internal process of the licensee. But the last one, source of the first payment in the account. From where is the first payment coming? That, my friends, is extremely important, especially when you're dealing with an entity where the beneficial owner identification is becoming difficult for you. The most best method of finding out is from where the funds are flowing into the account. Where is the source of the first payment? That helps in identifying who is the controller of the funds. As I said, it helps in identifying. It is not the sole identifier, but definitely it helps in identifying. Right. On KYC, I just thought I'll conclude with some additional KYCs or FAQs on Know Your Customers. So I submit my documents once. Why am I being asked for the documents again and again? I've submitted. I've told you I'm Savitha, I'm working for BIBF, I've done it. But why am I being asked for documents again and again? But because, my friends, your documents may expire. Circumstances may change. You may change your job, or you may change your house, and the licensee needs to know these changes. So they are going to update your records periodically. You may probably you may move from a low risk to a high risk person, or a high risk to a low risk person. So they need to know, again, as I said, KYC is not only to prevent financial or mitigate financial crime, but also to know the risk of the customer, right? So they will keep on periodically updating their records, and you need to inform them of any changes. Again, as I said, for example, I said they map the transactions against your profile. right? When they're doing this, if there is a change in your profile, they need to know that, right? So that is the reason they keep periodically updating their records. Can KYC help with ESG compliance? Right? Can KYC help with ESG? Of course they do. It does, especially for entities, because companies are also subject to KYC, and KYC collects a lot of data, right? So KYC can be used to collect and process data on ESG. For example, what is the business activity? Are they doing anything which is contradictory to the environmental protection? What about their diversity and inclusions in terms of their employment and recruitment? What is the role of the board? How is their internal policies and procedures? Right? So that is something which KYC helps. So KYC does help in ESG compliance as well. Okay. So KYC is only about knowing your customer. Is it only about KYC, know your customer? There is much more comprehensive to KYC than know your customer. KYC covers KYCB, know your customer's business. KYCF, know your customer's financials. KYCS, know your customers. Anyone for the yes? Know your customers' products, know your customers' supplier doesn't work here in capital markets, Ali. Know your customer status, right? So is he a retail investor? Is he a expert investor? Is he a exempt investor? Is he a accredited investor? So it's something which you would know. So KYCB, know your customer securities. Okay, fine. That's a good point. Okay, right? So know your customer's business, know your customer's transactions, know your customer's products, know your customer's securities. So these are some of the, so KYC encompasses everything, right? It's not only know your customer, know everything about your customer. Okay. So thank you. We have finished. I think time for questions now. I have done with my presentation. Go ahead. Yes, please go ahead. I'm waiting for the question. Yeah. Source of income and source of fund are different. I don't know who asked this question. It is different. As I said, source of income is, again, giving my example, my source of income is my salary. Source of fund can come from sale of a vehicle, sale of a property, sale of, let's say, land or something. So source of fund and source of income need not necessarily be the same. And as a capital market licensee, we need to understand that normally the source of fund, whenever there is a transaction, that transaction should be within the source of income that has been provided. If it is more, then additional documentation needs to be asked. For you, it is easier. For a capital market licensee, it is easier because you can ask for a bank statement. So that's easier for you. For a bank, I would probably say they do have methods, but it's easier for a capital market licensee because, as I said, bank statements are always available. Any other question?
Hi, Savitha.
Hi.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me clearly?
I can.
It's good to see you again. I'm not sure you remember me or not. I had a AML course with you. So I have a tiny question.
Mm-hmm.
So it's regarding company structure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the requirements to process an account opening for a company is to know the company's structure. I was wondering, when we obtain a article of association, does that usually cover the need to know the company's structure or not?
No, it doesn't. To be honest, it doesn't. You need to do a sigillat check. That's number one. Number two, if it is an entity owned by other entities, you need to go till the ultimate beneficial owners. That is why during my session I said the control of funds is extremely important. Who is controlling the entity, who controls the funds and the flow of funds to and fro, that can help you in identifying who the UBO is.
So when we say the company is a structure, we're talking about the UBOs, or is it something else? Like, can it also mean something else other than the UBOs?
See, structure means how is what is the structure of the company? Who is the owner of the company? What is the ownership structure? The legal form. Again, when we talk about is it a partnership or a legal limited liability company, we call it legal form. That is not the structure. Structure is who is the owner? Is it owned by an entity? Who are the owners? Who are the shareholders? That becomes the structure of an entity. Right? And your question, I presume, was on the structure, not on the form, right?
Yes, indeed, yes.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I have another. I have.
Sure, go ahead. Always happy to answer questions. Yeah.
So you mentioned that for online onboarding and for non-residents, that we need to obtain CBB's approval on every single application that is for non-residents. Does that also include Bahrainis who are non-resident? Like someone who's living abroad, but he's a Bahraini, he has the Bahraini passport, he has the Bahraini CPR, it's updated and all.
The simple answer to this question is CBB mentions non-residents, and non-residents I would take as anyone residing outside Bahrain. So applying the stringent regulations, I would say yes. You need to take it.
Okay. One last question. It's regarding the KYC that is submitted post the first meeting with the client. Let's say it's an individual, yeah? So it needs to be notarized. So if it's done by a notary outside of Bahrain, does that mean we need to legalize it as well, like get it attested? Because if it's outside of Bahrain,
you need to verify the see, for example, each country has a list of notaries.
Yes.
So all you need to do is verify that the notary public over there, as simple as that.
So if we can make sure, can verify the notary itself,
yes,
we can go ahead without having the document attested by the.
Because it's notarized. A notary means it's certified by someone who is authorized by the government to notarize. And remember, we are only doing it from a GCC country or a FATF member country. We are not taking the notarization from other countries.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Any other questions?
Hi.
Could be, hi.
This is Abdullah Abdeen. I'm from Bahrain Clear.
Okay, Abdullah, go ahead.
Thank you for this amazing AML course. I personally wish that you were physically with us here in the auditorium, so you could just feel everything from A to Z. As a matter of fact, just needed your personal opinion or view on the difference between AML on full commercial banks where they deal directly with cash, and capital market service provider where we only deal with securities. However, we know that securities always can be identified as a cash market, but we don't deal directly with cash. It's the bank who's dealing with the cash. Is there a kind of variety? Is there a kind of a difference between both? Is it considered as a high risk when it's dealing with the cash, and as a lower or medium risk when it's a capital market service provider? Thank you.
Great, Abdullah. Hopefully soon we'll have a physical meeting as well. Thank you so much. To answer your question, see, vulnerability exists in both cash and capital market transactions. Relatively, cash is more vulnerable, definitely, but that doesn't mean that we can say capital market is lower risk because they don't deal directly in cash. Because end of the day, capital market service providers can be used in the integration stage, which is very difficult to identify, basically, because you are entitled to rely on the due diligence done by the banks. Of course, the ultimate liability, if something wrong happens, falls on you. So the thing is, the relative vulnerability is Cash is highly vulnerable. Probably securities relating to cash can probably be, we can say, but then we have so many instances of, say, the capital market being used for money laundering. As during the session, I gave you the example of Deutsche's the mirror trading. We have wash trading. Now we have greenwashing. So we have so many instances that we cannot say that capital market is anyway less vulnerable. All I'm saying is analyze the risk, assess the risk, use a risk-based approach. If you feel that this customer or this transaction is not that vulnerable based on the profile, you can probably do a simplified due diligence and go ahead with the transaction. I hope I answered your question, Abdullah.
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I would like to add just one more question, if I may. There would be kind of responsibility with the brokers that are dealing directly with the clients, and we as Bahrain Clear being the only licensed clearinghouse. So what we basically do, we do onboard because the ownership is beneficial ownership structure in Bahrain. We don't deal with nominee or sometimes a trust. Even the trust are being fully regulated by the central bank. I wish there was a kind of, that we can distinguish between the responsibility of clearinghouse and the responsibility of the broker dealer. Because here, in our case, we are also sharing the responsibility with the broker. But I think the end responsible party should be the broker always.
Well, Abdullah, sorry to disappoint you, but that's not how it works. I'm sure you know that. Because yes, as a broker being a licensed financial institution, you're entitled to rely on their due diligence. Definitely, yes. But then you need to ensure that their level of due diligence is sufficient enough for you to onboard the do their transactions for them. Because if anything goes wrong from the broker's end of the day, the liability also reaches you as Bahrain Clear. So as a, just to repeat my answer, you can rely, but you need to ensure that they have a proper AML systems in place, customer risk profiling in place, and if you want information about a particular customer, they are in a position to give you the entire profiling of the customer, everything. If you ensure that, the liability is always there, that doesn't come down, but to some extent, you are satisfied that, yes, there is a due diligence and the broker is taking care of the KYC of the customers.
There is something unique.
Anyway, huh? We'll end up anyway. Savitha?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Zainab from Bahrain Clear as well.
Yes, Zainab.
Further to what was Fatma Abdullah saying, I'm just adding that we will end up as responsible anyway, regardless of what we do.
There is one argument, Zainab, if I may. There's something unique about Bahrain that we adopt the single regulatory model where the central bank is the single regulator to oversee the three sectors, banking, insurance, and capital market. Today, Bahrain, as a capital market, also sits as a chairperson on the World Federation of the Clearinghouses and African Middle East Depository Association. And there are other jurisdictions other than Bahrain in the world. There is a reason behind of asking an additional requirements by the clearinghouse, because the regulator for both sectors are different. For the banking is different than the capital market. In our case, we get this kind of resistance, so we fully respect. By the way, it's Bahrain Bourse, where the regulator before the regulator becomes the regulator of the capital market, and the current AML module was actually copied from the document that was issued by Bahrain Bourse. However, the thing is that we are asking for a duplicate requirement from each client, and that makes the thing a little bit even more frustrated for the client. So As I told you,
Abdullah, just to answer, just a small point, just one thing. See, the thing is, we are all in the fight together in the fight against financial crime. So it is not duplicating. For example, let's say the broker has missed something which you found out. So you are helping the regulators find out the weaknesses and helping them in the investigative process. So that, my friend, is because we can't take any chances in financial crime prevention. So that is my point. As simple as that. So when we are doing it, when we are doing this, we are providing an additional layer of support to the regulators and saying that no, the broker has done this. I'm also doing this. The broker has missed something. I have not. And if there is something suspicious, I'm reporting to you to help in your investigations. Right?
exactly. Just for information, I just made this discussion in order just to be a little bit updated of what is going on. Thank you very much,
Thank you, Abdul.
Savitha. It was a great pleasure having you on this very excellent AML course, if I may say.
Thank you, Abdullah. My pleasure as well. Any other questions? I think I had a spate of questions. Anyone else wants to repeat their question? As I know, source of income, for example, could be salary, and source of wealth could be a salary for some customers as well. No, source of wealth is basically okay. As an example, I can say source of wealth is an inheritance. Source of wealth is basically what, let's say, your total assets minus your net worth. Your net worth. So where did your wealth come from? Yeah, your wealth over a period of time may have been built from your salary. I'm not denying that, but we need to, so for example, that's why for higher risk customers, you take additional due diligence, enhanced due diligence, right? Any other questions? So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Rabab, go ahead. I can see your hands raised. Rabab. What will we do if the client doesn't submit? Okay, that's a call you need to take, Rabab. If the client is refusing to cooperate, you need not onboard them. You can refuse the business and you can file a STR. STR can be filed for potential clients as well. If you find that it is suspicious that the client is not produced, that's a call you need to take. It's a call between compliance and business. And I would always say compliance rules over business. Right, Rabab? I hope I answered your question. Thank you so much, Mariam. And Ali, I think we will be putting this slide. The slides would be available. I'm not sure how, but you can get in touch with, you can send a mail to the same ID from where you got the mail. Probably they would be able to send you the slides as well. Yeah. Thank you, Usma. Looking forward to more as well. Thank you. Yeah, Hannah. Okay, thanks, Hannah. Ali, you'll be sending the. Thank you, Mushtaba. Thank you, Sheikha. Thank you, Mushtaba. Thank you, Arlin. Same here, Arlin. Thank you, Kautar. Mohammed, thank you. Thank you. Oh, Anil, how are you? I hope all good, my dear. Nice to see you. I noticed you were there in the participation, in the participant
Yes,
list.
thank you, Savitha. How are you doing? I'm good too.
I'm good.
It's always wonderful getting your sessions. It's always informative. Really appreciate.
Thank you, Anil. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, I am.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Do keep in touch, my dear.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for attending. Hope to see you soon in some other webinars as well.
Yes, inshallah.
Thank you. Take care. Take care. Thank you, Mohammed. Welcome. Pleasure is mine as well. Sarah, thank you. You don't need to, you can't do a cash transaction about 3,000 for a jeweler. I don't know who asked that question. Before I could answer, see the name, it disappeared. It's not allowed under the AML law in Bahrain for jewelers to accept more than 3,000 BD in cash. I'm sorry, I don't know who asked that question. I hope I gave the answer. Yeah. Hannah, can I log out? Can I leave? Any other questions?
Yes, you can leave.
Okay,
I'll be
thank you.
closing
Thank
the
you.
section.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks so much. I think there's a question. Yes. I can see, but I don't know who is asking the question. Yeah, a presentation will be sent across. I think Hannah is taking care of that. Thank you. As of now, there is cash limits are maintained by the entities themselves. As of now, nothing from the regulator. I think someone asked the question for the insurance sector. Yeah. So thank you so much. See you all. Thank you.